وارزقنا صدق التوكل عليك وحسن الظن بك وامنن علينا بكل ما يقربنا إليك مقرونا بعواف الدارين يا أرحم الراحمين يا ربي. وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. So I believe that last time we met, we read the ayat of the 5th chapter of Riyad al-Salihin, correct? We ended with the ayat that begin the chapter? Or did we just end with the chapter of honesty and sidq?
As far as I know, is the chapter, but I wouldn't go by my recollection, Shaykh.
We did comment on the ayat, Surah al-Hadid.
Okay. Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. This chapter, al-Muraqaba, vigilance, is especially linked to the chapter that comes before it, honesty. In the chapter that we completed last time we met, alhamdulillah, we read the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ about sidq, honesty. Da' ma yuribuka lima la yuribuka. Leave that which you're unsure of or causes you hesitation in favor of what you are confident and sure of. And of course we talked about different ways that relates to the life of the believer when engaged in issues in gray areas, or just the mere honesty of knowing what's right and wrong and doing one's best not to lie to themselves, okay, because you can't be honest with Allah until you're honest with yourself. And when it doesn't appear that something is halal, it is best to avoid it. But at the end of the day, in the instructions of the Prophet ﷺ to leave what causes you hesitation or you are unsure of for that which you are sure of in the choices that you make in life, it returns the hakim in this situation is the individual. Right? I have to be honest. If I want to succeed, I have to be honest with myself. Is this causing me hesitation? Or is it not causing me hesitation? Such that I can act on this instruction from the Prophet ﷺ. And it becomes ultimately, as it's mentioned in the chapter of honesty, an issue of honesty. Say, much of the ahkam of Islamic law is linked to two things: authority and enforcement. Where the Muslim establishment has no authority, there are ahkam that just don't come into play. Because various ahkam, for example, of punishments, or for example, maybe different types of payments or diyat, okay? For example, the payment for manslaughter and others require the ability to enforce those laws. And there will be situations in the world and places in time where the Muslims in this particular region don't have the authority of enforcement or even the ability of enforcement. So many of the ahkam are put on pause when it comes to this particular group of Muslims. Because otherwise we have something called vigilantism. Right? And vigilantism, al-iftiyat ala al-imam, okay, which is essentially taking the law into one's own hands against the approval of the political authority. Right? This is haram in Islam because it leads to chaos. Right? And chaos threatens the well-being of families, it threatens the well-being of social institutions, and so on. threatens the ability of children to get to school and hospitals to do their jobs, water to run, the electricity to stay on, and all of that. Okay, so, and then of course there is something over and beyond this, right? It also forebodes loss of life and limb, which is not countenanced by the Sharia, right? We don't have a statistic that where we're willing to accept collateral damage, right? Where there's a possibility of the spilling of one drop of innocent blood, right? Then this is no go, right? All of that can be understood in the question of authority, right? Is there authority for jurists, people who are specialists in the law? Are they backed up by a political authority, or are they not backed up by a political authority? And where they're not, then there are other things that is much important, that are more important, because the point I wanted to get to is that enforcement itself is not an objective of Islam, except where it involves public safety. Right? Where it involves public safety, we cannot sit idly by. Why? While innocent neighbors and citizens, right, are being subjected to danger or damage. Okay? But otherwise, enforcement of rules, enforcement of laws, enforcement of penal codes is not an objective of why Islam exists on the face of the earth. Okay? Where qualified Muslims have been put in a position of responsibility, it becomes just that, a responsibility and a means to bring about the type of stability in a society that enables people to pursue the higher reasons for their existence, which are the objectives of the Deen of Islam: to know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and to adore Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So what are we left with? We're left with a very important principle that informs the civil philosophy of Islam, whether there is a Muslim establishment responsible for government institutions and these types of things or not. And that is conscientiousness. Okay? Having an ethical conscience, because that is ultimately what compels a person to follow what is right and avoid what is wrong, to follow what is correct and safe, and to avoid what is harmful to self and others. So it becomes a priority for us, and then where there is no authority, okay, where there is no authority, then we're left with just that. The conscience of individual citizens, the conscience of individual believers, and that holds across the board. And so people of conscience take it upon themselves to adhere to what is right and refrain from what is wrong, hopefully because they know that this is what might gain them and secure for them the love of the Creator that they wish to be intimate with. Otherwise, because they realize that if we don't adhere to this, other people won't adhere to this, and what goes around comes around. So either the driver in it is ikhlas and sincerity for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or it's just pragmatism. But at the end of the day, right, conscience, right, is an important issue, and it becomes a pastoral objective that defines the way we work with the community to raise people of conscience, And that brings us now into how we get there. Bab al-Muraqabah, the chapter of vigilance. Muraqabah, from raqabahu, yuraqibuhu, right? He is watching, right? A person is watching, she is watching. The question is, who is watching who? Right? That will be the question. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. About muraqabah, the scholars will say that muraqabah is one of two stations of ihsan, spiritual excellence. Right? And if you don't see him, then know that he sees you. If you don't see him, it is the consciousness of the slave that Allah is watching him, that Allah is watching her, and holding that in the heart. Holding that in the heart. There is a suggestion in muraqabah of takalluf. There is a suggestion in muraqabah of takalluf, affectation, taking on or making an effort. And when we see it as positioned in that second of two maqams of ihsan, and know that if you don't see him, he sees you, one is making an effort to be conscious that Allah is watching them. The first maqam of ihsan that we'll come back to is much, much higher than that, right? It's that one has the vision of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in their heart. The eye of the heart is aware of the presence of its creator, right? That is another station. But here we have muraqabah. There are people who have to make an effort to gain muraqabah or engage in this vigilance by takalluf, affectation, meaning I remind myself not to forget. Each step that I take, I bring to mind in a conscious, intentional effort the fact that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is watching me. Allahu ma'i, Allahu shahidi, Allahu nadirun ilayh. And maybe he repeats it or she repeats it to themselves. Allah is with me. Allah is witnessing me, is seeing me. Allah is looking at me. Allah is with me. Allah sees me. Allah is looking at me. And that is the conscious effort. Muraqabah bit-takalluf. But others will have muraqabah bil-ghalabah. They can't get rid of the idea, of the understanding, of the awareness of the consciousness that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is watching them in every moment. It overcomes them. In the first maqam, they're pursuing muraqabah. But in the second maqam, muraqabah is overwhelming them. Subhanallah. If Allah gave us that, we'd be doing well. Right? Allah give us that. Right? Allah make us people of muraqabah. No. Make us people who are more shy with you than we are with people, who are more modest with you than we are with people, who are more concerned with your opinion than we are with the opinion of people. What is the outcome of this vigilance that will come up in the ahadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam? What is the fruit that it bears when it takes root in the heart? The best of its fruit is uns, comfort. But we'll settle for its initial fruit, which is trepidation and fear and concern. We're safer there. Because there are two comforts. There is a false comfort and a comfort of love and intimacy that comes not because of my decision that here's who I am and here's my relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's something that wells up of its own accord, and one finds themselves supple and responsive to the call of their beloved. Allahumma razuqna, give us as our rizq that this be our maqam. But the false comfort is when someone is effectively feels that they're good with Allah and everything's fine and they're safe. This borderlines on something that is a major sin, which is to deem someone safe from Allah taking their faith away. In Arabic, it's phrased as al-amnu min makrillah, right? They plot and plan, and Allah plots and plans, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the best of plotters. So this makr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we might call it a stratagem. And what is meant by this phrase is the idea that I'm a believer, and I think that I'm a believer because I choose to be a believer. I'm a believer because I'm clever. I'm a believer because I have all of these great qualities that are intrinsic to myself, and I feel comfortable and I'm not worried that this is a gift that Allah gave. And just like our loved ones that we get a chance to spend some time with, Allah takes back what He gives. The gift of Iman is not something that we control. It's something we cherish. It's something that we serve. It's something that we seek to preserve. It's something that we show shukr for, but it's not something that we control. And the person who has this false comfort is on the border of falling into this terrible situation. He's already in a situation of istidraj, right? What's istidraj? Did we ever come up with a translation for istidraj? It's as if we discussed that before, maybe in a different class, right? But istidraj means to be taken or dragged by degrees. But the idea is that a person doesn't even realize. They think everything is going well. Look at all these blessings. I wouldn't have all of this wealth. I wouldn't have everything going right for me. I wouldn't have all of this fame and popularity if Allah didn't love me, right? So I must be doing good. So they take, for example, their achievements in the dunya, for the dunya, and see that in a sort of spin on a Protestant work ethic, right? To believe that, when everything's going right for you in the dunya, it is a sign that Allah loves you. Therefore, if things are not going right for a person in the dunya, it means that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not love them, right? In the one arkan, one rukn of the Protestant work ethic is that being wealthy, right, is angelic, right? Being wealthy is a type of, is godliness, right? It is godly to be wealthy, right? And to be poor is ungodly, right? And so we blame the poor for their poverty, and we praise the wealthy for being close to God merely because of their wealth and possessions, right? So we like ideas like having a work ethic. That makes sense. But then we have to be careful of terms, right? Dr. Karim Naham used to always say, or will often say, that that words have a genealogy, or ideas have a genealogy. They come from somewhere. So when we say them and use them, we should know their genealogy. And we have to be careful about saying and using loaded words, okay? So we like the idea of having a work ethic that resonates with us, but the phrase Protestant work ethic is loaded with a lot of ideas that really would not, Sayyidina Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam would not be fond of these ideas, okay? And these are modern ideas, right? And they don't even exactly come from Martin Luther either. They don't even come from Martin Luther either, right? And they're treated at length by the French sociologist and philosopher Max Weber. Talks about this idea. It's actually a very modern idea, okay? And it becomes very, very strong during the Great Depression here in America. right? Have anybody ever seen the play Annie? Don't tell me you watched the movie, okay? You have to see it on stage, right? So if anybody remembers Annie, right, it's about the Great Depression, and of course there's this stress going on, you know, with the people who are living in these, living under bridges and in old rail yards and stuff like this. You know, there's a massive homeless crisis in the United States in the 1930s, right? That was so long ago. Who can remember homeless crises like that, right? But there were actually people who didn't have homes, and others, you know, thought that that was fine as a policy, and so on and so forth, right? And then, you know, the extremely wealthy, but I'll leave it to you all to do your research on that. So part of the Protestant work ethic, or part of the roles that it played here in the country, was alleviating the wealthy of feeling that they have a responsibility to those who have less, because those who have less are to blame for their situation, right? And those who have are close to God. And here is the idea or the aqidah of zakat, okay? Zakat, one of the wisdoms that informs zakat, not its rationale, because its rationale has to be fixed to something that is ظاهر منضبط. One of the primary wisdoms that inform zakat is solidarity, okay? It is a charity that is taken from their rich and given to their poor, right? It's taken from the rich of a region and given to the poor of that same region where that money was earned. And one of the primary social effects is solidarity between the haves and the have-nots. They feel like they're in this together. We're all one society. We're one unified community. We care for one another in the ways that we are, right? And building on that, there's a further zakat, that if Allah has blessed you with something, right, even if it's just a skill set, that you give of that zakat, right? Or you give zakat on that blessing that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given you, even if it's not wealth in that way. So somehow, we're now talking about zakat when we were supposed to be talking about muraqabah, right? We'll go back to the lesson, inshallah. Or we'll look at some of the notes that the commentators gave for muraqabah, even better, okay? Tayyib. One of the levels of ihsan, one of the stations of the two stations of ihsan, the second station, in this regard, there is a hadith of Ubadah ibn Samit, that the Messenger alayhi salatu wasalam says, أفضل إيمان المرء أن يعلم أن الله معه حيث كان. The best faith, the best wasf, the best one of the best aspects, we'll say, literally the best faith. One of the best aspects of the faith, if not the best aspect of the faith of a person, is that he or she knows that Allah is with them wherever they are. That Allah is with them wherever they are. And of course that witness, we don't need to say, is not a physical witness, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is intimately and immediately aware of every aspect of a person's situation and thoughts. وَمَا أَحْسَنُ مَا قِيلَ, right? And one of the best things ever said in the way of muraqabah, according to Ibn A'lan al-Bakri, our commentator, who was one of the ulama of Mecca in his time, كَأَنَّ رَقِيبًا مِنْكَ يَرْعَى خَوَاطِرِي. It is as if a vigilant observer appointed by you is observing my thoughts, and another is watching my glances and my mind, or my heart, janani, right? Well, janan can also be mind, right? Is watching my mind. وَقَالَ ابْنُ And Ibn Ata al-Secondary said, in his hikam. But which part of his hikam? He said this in his munajat. At the end of the hikam al-Ata'iyya, he has a section called al-munajat, in which he speaks to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala intimately. He asks of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and supplicates. And one of the things he says in these special munajat is, Ilahi amiyat aynun la taraka alayha raqiba. So he says, my God, or Ilahi, my Ilah, the eye that does not see you as vigilantly observant has gone blind. Right? So we talk in Islam about what is bankruptcy and what is true bankruptcy. And also there are ideas about blindness and true blindness. The eye that sees or does not see that Allah is vigilantly watching. This brings us to another aspect of muraqabah, because there is the muraqabah of the slave for his Lord, the consciousness of the slave that Allah is watching him, and the muraqabah of his Lord for him. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is vigilantly watching him. In our verses, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, الَّذِي يَرَاكَ حِينَ تَقُومُ وَتَقَلُّبَكَ فِي السَّاجِدِينَ. The one who sees you when he stands, so the reference is to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and here we have the remembrance of Allah by Allah, right, in the Quran. You have the remembrance of the created for the creator, you have the remembrance of the creator for the created, and you have the remembrance of the creator for the creator. So Allah says about himself, Alladhi, the one who sees you when you stand, and when you, right, turn over, right, you turn over amongst those who prostrate. So one understanding of this is that as people stand, bow, and prostrate, stand, bow, and prostrate, is as if they're turning over like this in lines of prayer, standing and prostrating, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sees the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, who is directly being spoken to in this verse, but the same goes for every believer, right? As he goes about his affairs of life, right? And as he's even in his prayer from one day after another, from one rak'ah after another. And there's a more subtle understanding, okay, of this, that as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is speaking to the Messenger alayhi salatu wasalam, he's saying also that Allah has never lost sight of the Prophet Muḥammad alayhi salatu wasalam, who is chosen as final messenger from time eternal. There was never a time when the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam is not mukhtar in the design of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There's never a time when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not know that he's the chosen, and that includes before the existence of the world. And in this verse, right, there's a subtle intimation that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has never lost sight of his messenger, even as he's transferring from the loins of his forefathers to the wombs, right, of his grandmothers who came before. Through each generation of his forebears, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows exactly where he is, right, as far as seed goes, okay, and that you've always been. And then who are his forefathers? The understanding is this is for those scholars who take the position that the genealogy of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam does not contain any mushrikun, right? That there are no idol worshippers in the genealogy of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. Now, that Allah is watching, and in general we get from it that Allah sees us in all of our moments, and all of our actions, and all of our movements. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَهُوَ مَعَكُمْ أَيْنَمَا كُنْتُمْ. Right? So you see that there is a a link of sorts that the scholars see between muraqaba, vigilance, and ma'iyya, right? Allah's witness, as Allah is with His slaves, and He is with you wherever you are, right? And our simplest understanding of that is Allah is with you with His knowledge and His consciousness, His awareness of your situation. And of course, it's not something that is physical. Why? Because Allah is eternal, and how is it that something finite and something eternal can actually be side by side? I mean, if we even went into it any further, something finite necessarily has boundaries. Well, if you brought something eternal, if that was possible, put it next to the boundary of something finite, all of a sudden the eternal has a boundary? Well, then it wouldn't be eternal, right? So it is a logical contradiction. It is irrational. Right? We have a different approach to saying what is rational and what is irrational. Right? There are things in our lives that are not described by rationality or irrationality, and some things that are, right? But we need to check our definitions of rationality and irrationality. Allah says, "Inna Allah la yakhfa alayhi shay'un fil ardi wa la fis sama." There is nothing hidden from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the earth or the sky. Inna Allah la yakhfa alayhi shay'un. Here, shay'un. Anything. Where does any come from? When we say nothing, right? Or there is not anything. There is not, so anything is negated. There is not anything that escapes Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's vision. Tayyib. When we use, or when the indefinite noun is used, is this, when the indefinite noun is used in this way, it means that there are no exceptions, right? There are no exceptions, right? That's the literal meaning of this verse. And our principle in the principles of tafsir is that where the literal interpretation is possible, that is our default possibility. So our default is to the literal, okay? Unless there is a reason that prevents the literal meaning or suggests something otherwise. So there is no thing that escapes the vision of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. In the very grammatical structure of the verse is aqidah, right? If we're working at that level of subtlety, nothing escapes, not in the heavens and not in the earth. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, "Inna rabbaka la bil mirsad." This is why I think we did it. This is another thing that reminds me why I think we did these verses last time we were together. Right? So we talked about what it means for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to be in the lookout tower, the watchtower. Right? So one of the early Muslims was asked, where is Allah? Okay? And in his wisdom, he answered immediately, bil mirsad. This verse says, your Lord, verily your Lord is either lying in wait or in a watchtower where he can strike or pick off any intruder that might come close to the hima, the sanctuary or the fortress. Okay, so mirsad means to be like a sniper, okay, who has this high position where he can see everything and no one can see him, but he is in a position to actually strike a blow against anyone who gets caught in his field of vision, right, that he wants to make a target, right? This is why we're worried about the watchtower. But then you have a fortress or a mountain pass, and that guard point that enables the guard in the watchtower to lie in wait, to be vigilant, to keep an eye out and see everything coming, and also be in a position to strike anything that might pass by. is also a meaning of mirsad. So when someone asked this early scholar of the Tabi'een, where is Allah? He said, huwa bil mirsad. That's all you need to know, right? He's lying in wait, or he is in a position of vigilance where he always sees you even though you don't see him, right? If you let sink in the meaning of mirsad and you listen to that answer, right, it will make you shudder when you hear it, right? Allah yubarak fikum. In another verse, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, يَعْلَمُ خَائِنَةَ الْأَعْيُنِ وَمَا تُخْفِي الصُّدُورِ. It is He that knows the treachery of the eyes and what is hidden in the breast. In our first hadith, where's our first hadith? Here it is. Right, this is the hadith of ihsan. We didn't read this last time we met. Why don't you read it in English? You have the microphone, Sayyida Rahma.
Umar ibn al-Khattab narrates, one day while we were sitting in the company of the Messenger of Allah, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, there appeared before us a man whose clothes were exceptionally white and whose hair was pitch black. The effects of traveling were not visible on him, and none of us recognized him. He came and sat before the Messenger of Allah, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, in such a way that his knees touched the knees of the Messenger of Allah, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He then placed his palms on the thighs of the Messenger of Allah, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and said, "O Muhammad, tell me about Islam." The Messenger of Allah, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, said, "Islam means that you testify that there is none worthy of worship except Allah and that Muhammad is the Messenger of Allah. To establish Salah, give Zakah, fast in the month of Ramadan, and fulfill the pilgrimage to the house, Kaaba, if you have the means to undertake the journey." The man said, "You are correct." Umar radiallahu anhu says, "We were surprised because he posed the question and then affirmed the answer." The man then asked, "Tell me about Iman." The Messenger of Allah, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, replied, "It is to believe in Allah, His angels, His books, His messengers, and the last day, and to believe in fate, its good and its evil." The man said, "You are correct." He then asked, "Tell me about the ihsan." The Messenger of Allah, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, said, "It is to worship Allah as though you can see Him, and if you cannot visualize this, then know that He is watching you." He then asked, "Tell me about the hour." The Messenger of Allah, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, said, "The person who is being questioned knows no more than the questioner about it." He said, "Then tell me about its signs." The Messenger of Allah, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, said, "A slave woman will give birth to her master, and you will see the barefooted, the naked, the poor, and the shepherds competing with each other in constructing lofty buildings." He then laughed, and I, Umar, radiallahu anhu, waited for some time. The Messenger of Allah, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, then asked me, "O Umar, do you know who the questioner was?" I replied, "Allah and His Messenger know best." He said, "That was Jibreel. He came to teach you matters of your religion." Muslim.
يعلمكم. Does it say أمور دينكم? In this narration it says, أتاكم يعلمكم دينكم. Right? In Sahih Muslim, يعلمكم أمر دينكم. Right? So in the narration of So this is a narration of Muslim, and there is another narration of Muslim, right? So there's two narrations. One is he came to teach you your deen, and another, he came to teach you the affair of your deen. So the shahid, or the point of reference that we're interested in here in this hadith, as it pertains to the chapter of vigilance, where Imam Nawawi has put it, is when he asks him to explain to him al-ihsan, right? أخبرني عن الإحسان. So some of the commentators will say that when he says the ihsan, the spiritual excellence, what is the? That this al, right, of the definite article means that between the Prophet ﷺ and Jibreel is an ihsan that both of them know, that both of them have it in mind, such that one can say to the other, right, if I say, put this in the car, well, if you and I know each other well, you know which car it is to put it in, right? My car, right? Just kidding. But if we don't know each other well, right, it's the car, which car, right? The masjid's car, your uncle's car, right? Or what have you. We don't have that. And you notice that you'll have that one friend who starts talking to you about someone or something, right? Assuming that you know what he or she is talking about, and you have no clue who they're talking about or what that thing is. Why? Because you don't have this ahd, right? Or this ma'hud, right? Between one another. So the definite article can play that role. So what is this ihsan, right? They'll say that when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said in the revelation that Jibreel is bringing to the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, hal jaza'ul ihsani illa al-ihsan, for example. Is the reward for ihsan anything other than ihsan? Is the reward for the spiritual excellence or the excellent deed of the slave that he offers up to his Lord other than the Lord giving something excellent in return as a recompense to the slave? So what is this ihsan, right, all about? Ahsinu, فَإِنَّ اللَّهَ يُحِبُّ الْمُحْسِنِينَ, right? Do well, do goodness, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala loves the people of ihsan. Ahsinu. Inna Allah yuhibbul muhsinin, right? So there is an ihsan to be asked about. And what is the definition of this excellence? Okay? That you worship Allah as though you are seeing Him. And the commentators will say the full meaning of the sentence in the statement of the Prophet ﷺ is, worship Allah as though you are seeing Him and He sees you. And he took out, He sees you as part of His comprehensive speech, which is a mu'jiza, and the clarity of it, that it is something that will be known by the listener. Worship Allah as though you are seeing Him with the eyes of your sight. Because you see Him very clearly with the eyes of your heart. Now, worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, witnessing His presence in the consciousness of the eye of your heart, to the degree that it is as if you see Him with the eyes of your sight. Allah make us amongst those who see you in the Firdaus al-A'la after a good ending in this world. And the second level, which is more centrally concerned with the principle of vigilance in Islamic teaching. And if you don't see Him, know that He sees you. Right? Have that knowledge running through your veins. Right? And subhanallah, those who may achieve the first may sometimes find themselves in moments of heedlessness, stuck in the second or the third. Right? And that's why we have reminders so that we can come back to where we're supposed to be and strengthen as Muslims and believers. Allah, no. So part of this is that when you pray, when you make ibadah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you want to remove from your thoughts the thoughts of anything other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If possible, even the thoughts of one's own self. If possible, even the thoughts of the existence or the awareness that one's own self exists. This is not something that is always easily achieved. For some people, Allah gives it to them. Like Allah gives gifts to those who He will. But for most people, they have to work for it. Right? And it requires a little bit of a game plan and consistency and so on. Allah give us a game plan and consistency and a little bit of so on too. Right? Allah, you better keep them. Subhanallah. And that is the maqam of people in this ummah. This is what Islam wants you to be busy with. It's the essence of all of it. But sometimes in order to make space for ourselves and our loved ones and our neighbors to be busy with these more important things, we might have to come together to find out, to find a means to remove obstacles or harmful things in the path of ourselves or our loved ones or our neighbors that might inhibit them or prevent them from being able to spend more time focusing on this, right? If young boys in this country have to be worried every time they see a police officer or every time they drive their car, right, or get stopped, right? If that has to consume them constantly, then that's an obstacle that prevents people. It may not prevent everyone. In fact, it might be the cause of bringing some people to Allah. But that's not our responsibility. Our responsibility is to the principle in this deen, ad-darar yuzal, that harm is to be removed, meaning it's an imperative and a fard kifaya on the entire Muslim community to remove harms, right, from people's lives. And this derives from the statements of the Prophet ﷺ and brought by our Imam al-Nawawi in his 40 hadith, la darar wa la dirar. The second hadith, an Abi Dhar, whose name was Jundab ibn Junada, wa Abi Abdi al-Rahman Mu'adh ibn Jabal radiyallahu anhuma. Both are narrating this hadith from Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, who said, ittaqillaha haythuma kunta wa atbi'i as-sayyi'ata al-hasanata tamhuha wa khaliqin nasa bi khuluqin hasan. Rawahu at-Tirmidhi. No? تفضلي.
The Messenger of Allah said, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, fear Allah wherever you are. Follow up an evil deed with a good deed, which will wipe it out, and interact kindly with people.
Our shahid in the hadith is the first part, fear Allah, have consciousness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, fear the displeasure of Allah, literally protect yourself from the anger of Allah wherever you are. Wherever you are. Allah give us the tawfiq to succeed in doing that. But there is an implication of being vigilant and looking to preempt the lower nafs that wants to command to iniquity and be one step ahead. So have your mind and your heart be one step ahead of your ego, right? So you bring this to mind, be conscious that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is walking before you reach with your hand or step with your foot and so on, or speak with your tongue. Wherever you are, in all situations. And follow up a bad deed with a good one, right? Such that it will erase it, okay? Where these are not major sins that require direct repentance as well. And still, follow everything up with a good deed. The same thing with your remembrance, the same thing with your effort to get close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Okay? Make sure that your follow-ups with goodness and your engagement in good things kind of is a little bit more in both its quality and quantity than maybe some of our distractions or our slips, right? Let's try to see if we can't make, right, our better selves, right, outweigh or preponderate over the lesser. So, if we suppose, as has been suggested by, right, our teachers, that the heart of a person is like a glass, right? And suppose that the water, the contents of this glass, right, which takes on the color of its contents, the glass takes on the color of its contents, the water is just not the clearest water that could be, right? Maybe it's just a little bit soiled, a little bit dirty. But we had this nice pitcher of clear water, right? And what's in this pitcher of clear water? Healthy intentions, right? Good deeds, recitation of the Quran, remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, thinking, having a good opinion of Allah and a good opinion of the believers in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and we keep pouring and pouring this pitcher into our dirty glass, right? Eventually, the dirty water comes out the top and it is switched out for the clean. So as we're pouring things in through our hands and our eyes and our tongues and our ears and our footsteps and our intentions, which are sometimes not the intentions we're most proud of, let's see what we can do to reverse the ultimate course of things, to make sure that what we're pouring in that's good is more than what we tend to be pouring in that is otherwise, right? And we can be living with this instruction of the Prophet ﷺ. And finally he says, وَخَالِقِ النَّاسَ بِخُلُقٍ حَسَنٍ, and interact with other people with good character. What if we made that our default? Meaning, other person, khalas, good character. Okay? That's my default. I'm not saying that that's my default. Everybody here who knows me knows that that's not my default. Right? But, you know, inshallah, Allah's qada and qadr will overtake me and I'll become a better person. The point being is that one of us needs to decide that our default is going to always treat other human beings with good character. Not just our friends, not just believers who have approved aqidah, right? But all human beings. That's the default. And we have to stop and think, like the Sahabi that hears Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam all the way down the road inside the masjid telling everybody after the prayer, right? And before going home, everybody sit down, right? Because he has something to tell them. And this Sahabi hasn't made it to the masjid, but he can hear the voice of his beloved sallallahu alayhi wasallam commanding him, right? Everyone to sit down. Well, that applies to me. He sits down in the middle of the road and he stops. He says, maybe he's only talking to the people right there with him inside the masjid. I think that's what it is. And he gets up and he continues on down to the masjid, right? So if our default was that we try to not neglect anyone, not blow anyone off, okay? Not to give anyone the cold shoulder, right? Sometimes we might give someone the cold shoulder or blow them off, not on purpose, our minds were distracted. But we should have enough vigilance over ourselves, because we have vigilance just like Allah has vigilance for the slave, and the slave has vigilance for his Lord watching him. The slave also needs to have vigilance while for his Lord also upon himself, self-awareness. Man arafa nafsahu arafa rabbahu. Right? Whoever knows his self knows his Lord. right? Islam is interested in self-critique. Islam is interested in self-awareness. MashaAllah, I have met people who have never ever done anything wrong and are never ever responsible for whatever goes awry in any given situation. MashaAllah, I'm fortunate to have known such people, right? But the point is, right, let us be conscious of how we comport ourselves with others. The Sahaba, they said that the Messenger ﷺ, when he spoke to you, he gave you his full attention to the point where you thought that you were the only person in the world for those moments that he gave to you. Subhanallah. Shaykh Husam al-Rifa'i, that is his khulq. That's his character. Subhanallah. And you hear people talking about the inheritors from the Prophet ﷺ and saying this is how they were. Subhanallah. And we've mentioned before that in old neighborhoods that have been neighborhoods of knowledge, right, like the neighborhood of Midan, right, in Damascus, the people of that neighborhood know the shama'il, character of the Messenger ﷺ in the inheritors of the Prophet ﷺ that they grew up with in that neighborhood, in their scholars, and they don't even know it's the character of the Prophet ﷺ. Subhanallah. That is a philosophy of education. That is a serious philosophy of education. Ya Rabbi. Subhanallah. Allah make us an acceptable khalaf for an amazing salaf. Radiallahu anhum. Ayyadakumullah. Tayyib. So, I think that is enough for today. And this time I will do my best to try to mark the lesson more consistently. Ayyadakumullah. Are there any questions or anything before we break? Anybody have any thoughts? It's 7 o'clock, an okay time to keep the session at? Before Ramadan, what time were we starting? Oh, it was 7? Okay. Right, so maybe that was a dumb question. طيب then اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. أحسن